No human being can survive inside a giant fish. Not for long. Not without air. Not without light. Inside such a creature, there is complete darkness. Oxygen is almost non-existent. Thick muscular walls contract relentlessly, designed to crush and dissolve. Digestive acids break down flesh and bone. Panic would set in almost immediately. Consciousness would fade within minutes. From every biological and historical standpoint, survival is impossible. Yet ancient records claim that a man lived, not for moments, not for hours, but for 3 days and 3 nights. He did not survive because of strength. He did not survive because of preparation. He survived because he was preserved. And here is the detail most stories overlook. He was not alone. Not because another human shared the space, but because the presence of God entered the depths with him. This is not a story about a fish. It is a story about mercy reaching a place designed for destruction. This is the story of Jonah. Long before Jonah ever set foot on the road that would carry him away from God, there existed a city whose reputation reached far beyond its walls. Nineveh. It was not merely a large city. It was a feared one. Situated along the eastern bank of the great river Tigris, Nineveh stood as one of the most powerful cities of the ancient Near East. Its stone walls were thick and wide, reinforced with towers, and guarded day and night. From a distance, travelers could see its size rising from the land like a man-made mountain, a testament to strength, wealth, and domination. Inside its gates lived tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands, gathered from conquered territories, forced laborers, soldiers, merchants, and nobles. Nineveh was the heart of the Assyrian Empire, and the Assyrian Empire was known not for mercy, but for cruelty. Their armies moved with deliberate terror. When they conquered a city, they recorded their victories in stone carvings and inscriptions, not hiding their brutality, but celebrating it. Prisoners were impaled. Kings were flayed. Entire populations were displaced. Fear was their weapon, and it worked. Nations surrendered without battle simply at the mention of Assyria's approach. In Nineveh, violence was not an accident of war. It was policy. It was culture. It was pride. The cries of the wounded echoed in its streets. The wealth of defeated lands filled its storehouses. Blood had soaked into the memory of the city for generations, and God saw it. The wickedness of Nineveh did not remain hidden behind walls or empires. It rose upward like smoke. It spread outward like a stain. It reached the ears of the Lord of heaven and earth. Judgment was not sudden. It was long delayed. Warnings had passed through history in the silence of ignored conscience. Opportunities for repentance had been wasted through arrogance. The city had grown powerful, and with power came the belief that nothing could touch it. Nothing, except God. Far from Nineveh, in the land of Israel, lived a man who knew God's voice. His name was Jonah. Jonah was not a stranger to divine instruction. He was a prophet, accustomed to hearing the word of the Lord and declaring it. His life had been shaped by obedience, by prayer, and by the responsibility of carrying messages that were often uncomfortable, yet necessary. He understood judgment. He understood mercy. And he understood what Nineveh deserved. Jonah was not unaware of Assyria's crimes. Stories traveled fast in the ancient world. Survivors told of cities erased, families destroyed, and peoples humiliated. Jonah knew that Nineveh's violence was not rumor, it was documented reality. For Jonah, the idea that such a city might escape punishment was deeply troubling. Yet one day, without ceremony or warning, the word of the Lord came to him. Not as a suggestion, not as a question, but as a command. Jonah was instructed to rise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it. He was to declare that their evil had come before God and that judgment was near. It was not an unfamiliar assignment in form. Prophets had always been sent to speak difficult truths. But this assignment was different. Nineveh was not Israel. Nineveh was not a neighboring nation. Nineveh was the enemy. To go there was to expose himself to danger. To speak there was to risk death. But Jonah's fear went deeper than personal harm. Jonah understood God's character. He knew that God was slow to anger. He knew that God delighted in repentance. He knew that mercy followed humility. And Jonah feared that if Nineveh heard the warning and turned from its evil, God would forgive them. That was what Jonah could not accept. In Jonah's mind, some sins deserved judgment without delay. Some evils were too great to overlook. If justice meant anything, Nineveh should fall. The command forced Jonah into conflict, not with the city, but with the heart of God. He did not argue. He did not protest aloud. He did not seek clarification. Instead, Jonah ran. Not in panic, not in haste, but with calculated distance. He went down to the port city of Joppa, where ships sailed westward across the Mediterranean Sea. While Nineveh lay to the east, Jonah deliberately chose the opposite direction. Tarshish was known as the farthest destination imaginable, a place beyond familiar borders, beyond responsibility, beyond the reach of expectation. Jonah paid the fare. Jonah boarded the ship. Jonah went below deck. Every step carried him farther from the land God had pointed to. The sea stretched before the vessel, wide and indifferent, its surface calm. To Jonah it seemed like freedom. Distance felt like relief. Silence felt like escape. But the sea is never neutral. The God who made the land also made the waters. The one Jonah fled from was already ahead of him. As the ship moved farther from shore, the atmosphere changed. The sky darkened in stages, not suddenly, but with intention. Winds began to rise, first as warnings, then as force. Waves grew taller, heavier, striking the hull with increasing violence. What had been routine travel turned into chaos. Experienced sailors sensed danger immediately. These were men who knew storms. They had survived tempests before. But this storm was different. It did not move like nature's randomness. It felt aimed, targeted. The ship groaned under the weight of the sea. Cargo was thrown overboard. Every effort was made to lighten the vessel. Prayers rose, each man calling upon his own God, desperate for relief. And still, the storm intensified. Below deck, Jonah slept. It was not the sleep of peace. It was the sleep of avoidance. Eventually, the sailors found him. The silence of the man who should have been praying stood out more than any cry. When questioned, Jonah revealed the truth. He did not conceal his identity. He did not deny responsibility. He confessed that he was fleeing from the Lord, the God who made the sea and the dry land. Fear overtook the sailors. This was no ordinary offense. This was rebellion against the Creator. They asked what must be done. Jonah's answer was final. He told them to throw him into the sea. It was an acceptance of consequence. Jonah understood that his disobedience endangered everyone aboard. He understood that the storm would not stop while he remained. Reluctantly, they acted. The moment Jonah struck the water, the storm ceased. The sea, moments before violent and uncontrollable, became calm. Jonah sank. The waters closed over him. The light vanished. His body descended into the depths, where the temperature dropped and the pressure increased. The strength that had carried him onto the ship failed him now. Death was certain. And yet, it did not come. Instead, something vast moved beneath him. God had prepared a great fish. Not as punishment, but as provision. In defiance of every natural law, Jonah was swallowed whole. Darkness enclosed him. The world he had known disappeared entirely. Inside the fish was a place no human being was meant to survive. Yet Jonah lived. Not because the environment was gentle, not because the danger was imagined, but because Jonah was no longer alone. God had followed him into the depths. And the story was only beginning. The interior of a great sea creature is not a place of refuge. From every known biological and historical standpoint, the belly of such an animal represents a sealed environment designed for destruction, not preservation. Ancient seafarers feared it. Modern science confirms it. Nothing that enters remains alive for long. Within the body of a large fish, light does not exist. The moment the mouth closes, Absolute darkness follows. Oxygen is scarce, consumed quickly by internal processes. Thick muscular walls contract rhythmically, designed to force prey downward. Gases from digestion build pressure. Acids break down flesh, scale, and bone with relentless efficiency. Survival inside such a creature defies logic. In moments, a human body should panic. In minutes, consciousness should fade. In hours, life should end. Yet Jonah remained. Time inside the fish did not move like time on land. There were no markers of day or night.
No geraísen.
No sound except the constant movement of the creature's muscles and the shifting of water and gas within its body. Jonah's senses would have been overwhelmed, breath shallow, heart racing, mind struggling to understand where he was. This was not shelter. This was confinement. This was not rescue in any human sense. This was suspension between death and life. And Jonah knew it. He had chosen disobedience. He had chosen distance. Now he was surrounded by the consequences of his decision. There was nowhere to run. No ship to board. No direction left to choose. Only one option remained.
Prayer.
From the depths, Jonah cried out. Not to escape, but to acknowledge. His prayer was not a demand. It was a confession of helplessness. He spoke of being cast into the deep, of waters closing over him, of sinking beneath waves and currents beyond his control. Jonah recognized that this place, this impossible environment, had been allowed by God, yet it had not destroyed him. The fish was not a random accident of the sea. It was appointed. The same God who sent the storm now sustained Jonah's breath. The same God Jonah fled was the only presence left to him. Jonah was not alone in the belly of the fish. Not because another human shared the space, but because God was there. Divine presence is not limited by geography. It does not retreat when man rebels. It does not abandon at the edge of obedience. Even in the most hostile environment imaginable, God remains sovereign. The belly of the fish became a boundary. Judgment could go no farther. Death could not cross that line. What Jonah had assumed would be his end became a pause. A waiting place. A confrontation between a man's will and God's purpose. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jonah existed in this suspended state. Every hour was a reminder of dependency. Every breath was borrowed. Every movement of the creature surrounding him reinforced a single truth. Survival was not natural. It was miraculous. During that time, Jonah's resistance began to dissolve. Anger gave way to understanding. Fear gave way to humility. Pride gave way to surrender. He acknowledged that salvation belongs to the Lord. That deliverance is not earned by obedience, nor lost permanently by failure. It is given by grace. The fish did not soften. The darkness did not lift. But Jonah's heart changed. And when the time appointed by God was complete, the preservation ended. At God's command, the fish turned toward land. With violent expulsion, Jonah was released. He emerged not into the sea, but onto dry ground.
Weak.
Disoriented. Covered in the evidence of where he had been.
Alive.
The impossible had occurred. Jonah, the man who ran, stood once again under open sky. And then the word of the Lord came to him a second time. The command had not changed. Jonah was instructed to go to Nineveh and speak exactly what God told him. This time, Jonah did not flee. This time, he did not calculate outcomes or weigh fairness. He obeyed.
Nineveh was vast.
A city so large that it required days to walk through. Jonah entered it with a simple message, one of impending judgment. There were no embellishments, no threats beyond what God had revealed. And something unprecedented happened. The people listened. From the common citizen to the highest authority, the city responded. They fasted. They humbled themselves. They turned from their violence. Judgment paused. God, seeing their repentance, showed mercy. The city that Jonah believed should fall was spared. And Jonah, who had been spared in the depths of the sea, now stood as a witness to the mercy he once resisted. The fish had not been Jonah's punishment. It had been his preservation. The darkness had not been abandonment. It had been instruction. Jonah ran from God. Yet God never abandoned Jonah. Nineveh's response to Jonah's message unfolded with a speed that defied precedent. The city had long been known for dominance built on fear. Its walls stood high not only to defend its people, but to display power. Violence was woven into its identity. Conquest, exploitation, and cruelty had shaped its reputation across the region. Yet when the warning was spoken, resistance did not follow. From market squares to private dwellings, the message spread. The announcement of coming judgment cut across social divisions. Men who had never bowed to any authority lowered themselves. Women who had profited from corruption turned away. Even those in positions of command ceased their orders. The king himself rose from his throne. He removed his royal garments, exchanged them for sackcloth, and sat in ashes. A decree went out across the city. No one was to eat or drink. Every person, from greatest to least, was to turn from violence and cry out to God. This response was not demanded by Jonah. It was not orchestrated through fear tactics or persuasive skill. The prophet delivered a message without embellishment, expecting rejection. Instead, repentance spread, and God took note. Judgment is not God's desire. It is his response when repentance is absent. When repentance appears, even among the most unlikely, mercy follows. God saw their actions. He saw that they turned from their evil ways, and he relented from the destruction he had declared. Nineveh was spared. For Jonah, this outcome did not bring relief. It brought anger. The prophet who had survived the depths now struggled on the surface. Jonah had obeyed, but his heart had not yet aligned with God's. He expected judgment. He anticipated collapse. He believed justice required destruction. Instead, mercy interrupted his expectation. Jonah withdrew from the city. He moved east and found a place to sit and observe. He constructed a temporary shelter, positioning himself where he could see Nineveh. Though spared, the city still stood. Jonah waited, perhaps hoping the decision would be reversed. It was there, in waiting, that Jonah confronted his deepest conflict. This was why he had run. Jonah had known God's character from the beginning. He knew God was gracious, slow to anger, and abundant in mercy. He knew that repentance could alter outcomes. And that knowledge troubled him. Jonah did not resent God for judgment delayed. He resented God for mercy extended. His understanding of fairness did not match God's authority. God responded, not with punishment, but with instruction. A plant grew rapidly near Jonah. It provided shade and relief from the heat. Jonah welcomed it. For the first time since Nineveh's repentance, he experienced comfort. Then the plant withered. A worm destroyed it. A scorching wind followed. Jonah was left exposed under the sun, discomfort replacing ease. His frustration returned immediately. God questioned him. Was it right to be angry over a plant that he did not cultivate, that existed briefly and vanished? Jonah valued its comfort deeply, yet it was temporary. God then revealed the lesson. If Jonah could grieve a plant he did not create, should God not show compassion to a city of over 100,000 people, people who did not know right from wrong, along with their animals? The message was clear. God's mercy is not selective. It is not limited by history, reputation, or personal resentment. Compassion is not weakness. It is sovereignty expressed through grace. Jonah's journey did not end with Nineveh's repentance. It ended with a question that extends beyond the prophet and confronts every reader. Is God permitted to be merciful to whom he chooses? The story does not record Jonah's answer. Instead, it leaves the reflection open. Jonah's experience reveals more than a prophet's failure or obedience. It exposes the tension between human expectations of justice and divine expressions of mercy. The depths of the sea were not the final lesson. The depths of the human heart were. The story of Jonah is often remembered for the fish. But the fish was never the central mystery. It was the presence. Jonah's journey reveals a truth that unsettles simplistic views of obedience and punishment. From the moment Jonah received his calling to the moment God questioned his anger outside Nineveh, one pattern remained consistent. God did not withdraw. When Jonah ran, God was present. When Jonah sank, God was present. When Jonah was enclosed in darkness, God was present. When Jonah obeyed reluctantly, God was present. When Jonah questioned God's mercy, God was still present. Jonah was not alone in the belly of the fish, because divine presence does not retreat when human will resists. The ancient narrative makes this unmistakably clear. The fish is never described as acting on instinct. It is appointed. The storm is not accidental. The calm that follows is immediate and intentional. Every element obeys command. Creation responds even when the prophet resists. This reveals a core theological pattern repeated throughout ancient Hebrew history. God's purposes are not defeated by human failure. They are often fulfilled through it. Jonah's survival in the fish was not a reward for righteousness. It was a demonstration of mercy preceding repentance. Jonah did not escape consequence. He faced fear, confinement, and humiliation, but consequence did not become destruction. This distinction matters. Judgment and destruction are not identical. Within the belly of the fish, Jonah experienced judgment in the form of confinement and helplessness, but he also experienced preservation. God did not spare Jonah from discomfort. He spared him from death. This balance defines the narrative. When Jonah emerged onto land, he carried evidence of where he had been. His body was marked. His strength was diminished. Obedience did not erase the experience. It reframed it. Jonah preached differently because he had survived. His words carried weight not because of eloquence, but because of reality. He had encountered the boundary of life. He spoke as someone who knew that judgment could come and mercy could intervene. Nineveh's repentance stands as one of the most unexpected mass responses recorded in ancient history. A foreign city, known for brutality, turned at the voice of a reluctant messenger. The focus is deliberate. The transformation of Nineveh is not presented as proof of Jonah's effectiveness, but as evidence of God's sovereignty. Jonah was merely the vessel. God was the force. Even Jonah's anger after Nineveh's survival serves the narrative. It exposes the limits of human compassion. Jonah desired mercy for himself, but resisted it for others. This tension is not corrected through rebuke alone, but through illustration. The plant, the worm, the wind, each is appointed, just as the fish had been. Through these events, Jonah is taught that compassion cannot be selective if it is to reflect divine character. The value of life cannot be measured by personal grievance or historical resentment. God's final words in the narrative do not conclude with punishment or reconciliation. They conclude with a question that extends beyond Jonah, beyond Nineveh. Jonah ran from God. Yet God never abandoned Jonah. Jonah disobeyed. Yet God preserved him. Jonah deserved judgment. Yet God chose mercy. If God could be present in a place designed for death, he can be present in any darkness. If God could preserve a man who ran, he can restore one who returns. The same God who followed Jonah into the depths still calls those who are running today, beyond the ancient world. If God is patient with the rebellious, merciful to the repentant, and present even in disobedience, then the question turns outward. Who is beyond his reach? The story offers no closure for Jonah's internal struggle because the narrative is not solely about him. It is instructional. It confronts the listener with the scope of divine mercy. Jonah's presence in the fish declares that no depth is unreachable. Nineveh's repentance declares that no people are irredeemable. And the unanswered question declares that the listener must decide how to respond.